Welcome to Fish People, a series from the Natural Justice podcast where we talk to the people in the global fisheries sector. Through honest conversations with fishers, scientists, inspectors, and more, we explore the human side of an industry that feeds the world. Our guest today is Widad Natify, head of the VMS unit at the Moroccan Fisheries Monitoring Centre. With nearly 12 years of experience at the Ministry of Fisheries, she brings a deep expertise in Morocco's fisheries management system and its role in international collaboration and ocean governance. We'll be diving into all of this today. Thank you so much for joining us today, Widad, and welcome to the Natural Justice Podcast. It's great to see you again.
Hi, Eva. It's really great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation. It's a real pleasure to reconnect and to have the opportunity to share a bit of my professional journey, my passion for the ocean and the work we are doing in Morocco around fisheries monitoring and ocean governance. So I'm excited to dive in and explore these topics with you.
I've asked you to join this podcast, not only because I think you have a very interesting set of experience in this whole world of ocean governance, but I also think, you have a lot of sympathy and respect for the different perspectives of the stakeholders, and leading with empathy is ultimately such an important thing to make sustainable change in fisheries management. And I therefore really appreciate you as a person and your approach, and would like to really dive in and understand. You're a very ambitious woman. Could you tell us why you decided to channel this ambition into fisheries management specifically?
Sure. So I would start from the beginning. I was born in Agadir. It's a coastal city in Morocco. It's a small one where the ocean isn't just a backdrop, it's a heartbeat. It's part of our identity. Growing up there, the sea was always present in our food, in the stories our elders told, in the rhythms of daily life. So I remember going to the port with my father, watching the fishermen bring in their catch, listening to the sounds of the boats, the gulls, that mix of life and labor. It left like a deep imprint on me. That early connection shaped my path in a very natural way. So I chose to study marine science and eventually pursued a master's degree in the protection and valorization of marine resources. What fascinated me was the idea that the ocean wasn't just something to be exploited. It was something to be protected, managed, and respected. I became very interested in how we could use ocean resources more wisely, how we could build a future where marine ecosystems are healthy and coastal communities can still thrive. That curiosity led me to enroll in a PhD in aquaculture. I saw that time that aquaculture as a promising solution, a way to reduce pressure on wild fish stocks. However, as I dug deeper into my research, I discovered something that really unsettled me. The first meal given to fry, baby fish, is fish meal, and fish meal is made by harvesting wild fish. I had this moment of pause, almost disbelief. Here I was, believing aquaculture was the solution to overfishing, only to realize it was still tied to the very problem it aimed to solve. That contradiction really shocked me, and it changed the way that I thought about sustainability. It was around that time that I joined the Ministry of Fisheries, and that became a turning point. I started working at the Fisheries Monitoring Centre, specifically within the Fisheries Monitoring System unit. For the first time, I was able to see fishing activity unfold in real time through satellite data, vessel tracking, and I could monitor where boats were going, how they were fishing, and where pressure was building. It was like gaining a new kind of vision, if you may understand. Ocean not just as a vast blue expanse, but as a dynamic living space of activity, regulation, and sometimes conflicts. This experience made me realize that science alone wasn't enough. We need governance, clear rules, international cooperation, and enforcement mechanisms to ensure that what we know scientifically is translated into sustainable practices. And that's what drew me toward the fight against IUU fishing. I began to understand that sustainability is not just about marine biology, it's about justice, it's about equity, It's about who has access to resources, who benefits from them, and who is held accountable when rules are broken. Driven by these questions, I applied for the United Nations Nippon Foundation Fellowship, and I was honored to be selected. That program changed everything for me. It gave me the chance to study international law and ocean governance in a deep and structured way. I was able to look at the global frameworks that guide how we manage and protect our oceans, from ANCLOS to regional fisheries agreements, and to connect those frameworks to the realities I'd seen on the ground, or rather at sea. It felt like more than academic opportunity. It felt like a moment of alignment. You know, when you follow your passion with sincerity, sometimes the right doors open. And that's exactly how it felt. The fellowship didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of years of work, passion, and a genuine commitment to making a difference. During that journey, I also participated in the Summer Academy at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea in Hamburg, in Germany. So that was another unforgettable chapter, to be in that setting, surrounded by judges, scholars, and fellow practitioners from all over the world. It was truly inspiring. I didn't just study the law there. I discussed it, debated, brought it to life through real cases and shared experiences. And to receive my certificate with distinction was deeply affirming. It reminded me that I was on the right path. So now, looking back now, my journey has taken me from the shores of a small city in Morocco to international institutions, from science to policy to law. It's been a continuous evolution, each chapter building on the last, each experience deepening my understanding. And what keeps me going is the belief that sustainability isn't just a technical goal, it's a moral one. Protecting the ocean means standing up for transparency, fairness, and shared responsibility.
I think that's beautifully said. And it really does sound like you're exactly where you need to be. And also, like, nothing is random. Like, you're really through every step that ultimately brought you to where you are now and the experience you have. You've always been kind of thinking, I guess, very deeply about, why am I doing this? You know, what is ultimately the benefit to people, to planet? What should be the end goal here? And I think that's beautiful, to be so diligent about your career and what you want to contribute to. So your ambition led you to pursue a PhD, this time focused on fisheries, and the title is The Implementation of International Conventions and Instruments to Combat Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing, or IUU, fishing in Morocco. If someone listening to this would read your thesis right now, what would be the main things that you would want them to learn from reading it?
Yeah, that's correct, Eva. During my time as United Nations Nippon Foundation Fellow, I had the opportunity to really zoom out and look at the bigger picture, to reflect on the challenges I had seen firsthand in Morocco and connect them to the global frameworks designed to address them. So my thesis focused on as you said, on the implementation of international conventions and instruments to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in Morocco. And in many ways, it was a very natural continuation of both my academic background and my professional experience in fisheries monitoring. I spent a lot of time analyzing how international legal frameworks like the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the FAO, Port State Measures Agreement, and regional agreements are translated into national legislation, and more importantly, how they are actually implemented in practice. Because sometimes the challenge isn't the absence of rules, but how those rules are oh my God, operationalized. I had difficulty with this word.
It's terrible.
Yes, yes. So on the ground, at sea, in ports, and across institutions. So the core question I explored was how Morocco could better leverage satellite-based technologies like vessel monitoring system and automatic identification system, or what we call IES, to monitor fishing activity across its exclusive economic zone. These systems offer real-time insights into vessel movement, allowing us to track compliance, identify suspicious behaviors, and direct enforcement resources more strategically. But the technology alone isn't enough. What became very clear to me is that we also need strong legal frameworks, proper interagency coordination, and the human capacity to interpret and act on the data. As a Moroccan, I can say that Morocco has made significant progress in this area. We've invested in monitoring infrastructure, developed a robust VMS platform, and shown a strong political commitment to fighting IUU fishing. However, the thesis allowed me to look critically at the remaining gaps. For instance, there is a need to further integrate different surveillance systems into a unified national monitoring strategy. Adding to that we need harmonizing national laws with evolving international obligations. Another dimension of the research involved evaluating Morocco's alignment with global commitments, such as the FAO's Port State Measures Agreement, which aims to prevent IUU caught fish from entering markets through port inspections and conservation and enforcement measures adopted by regional fisheries management organizations like ICAT. So I explored how Morocco's legal and institutional setup either or constrained these efforts. Key insight that emerged was the importance of cross-sector collaboration. Combating IUU fishing isn't just the job of fisheries department. It involves other entities and stakeholders such as maritime authorities, customs, the navy, law enforcement, and legal institutions. My thesis proposed a governance model that emphasizes integrated approaches using real-time data, fostering communication between agencies, and building legal coherence across sectors. Ultimately, the goal was to bridge law, policy, and technology, and to offer a roadmap for how Morocco can move from compliance to leadership in sustainable fisheries governance. Because the fight against IUU fishing, this is my personal opinion, it's not only about rules and tools, it's also about political will, institutional clarity, and the shared vision of sustainability. That's what I think and what I believe. So if I could leave the audience with three main takeaways from this research, the first point is that Morocco is on the right path has made impressive strides in aligning its legal frameworks with international obligations, but enforcement mechanisms and regional cooperation still need to be scaled up. The second point is that IUU fishing isn't only about bad actors, rogue vessels, all about information gaps, lack of transparency, fragmented institution. In many cases, what's unreported or unregulated is a result of systemic weaknesses, not just intentional wrongdoing. And the last point is that technology can be a game changer, especially tools like VMS, satellite tracking, and electronic reporting, but only if they are supported by investments in people, in training that allow data to be used effectively, using law and technology not just to monitor, but to govern the ocean space in a way that's just inclusive and sustainable.
I think that's very well articulated. And I also think the challenges you mentioned in those three conclusions will really resonate with a lot of people working in this field of IUU. Like, yeah, technology is great, but if you don't have a broader system and capacity and understanding, it might not really do that much. And, IUU is such a complex issue. It may sometimes be a little bit disappointing to hear, but of course it's going to require a very complex resolution that will need the buy-in and the support from a lot of agencies. And what I think is really interesting that you bring up is the challenges sometimes in communication between different agencies within the same government, for instance. And this is something that I am learning now as well in the context of research that I am doing in, communication around fisheries data and possible hurdles that, different organizations might run into in the context of sharing fisheries data. And very often it's assumed that it only gets complex once it crosses your border or once it goes from a state entity to a third party, a non-state entity. But often it already is very difficult even before that. And there might not be the systems and the opportunities to share data between them. So I think that's a very interesting point. You're the head of the VMS unit, which is part of the Fisheries Monitoring Centre. If anyone doesn't quite know what a Fisheries Monitor Centre is, could you explain this briefly, and why is this centre so important in the context of preventing illegal fishing?
You can think of a fisheries monitoring center as the control tower for a country's fisheries oversight system. It's where real-time surveillance, data analysis, and strategic decision-making all converge to monitor and manage what's happening at sea. Our primary tool is the Vessel Monitoring System, or the VMS, which provides live location data from fishing vessels. But over the years, our system has become more sophisticated. We've been integrating other technologies, such electronic logbooks, to build a comprehensive picture of maritime activity. So each morning, our operators sit down to dashboards filled with signals and satellite feeds, but really those numbers represent people, vessels, and marine ecosystems. Behind each blip on the screen, it's a decision that might affect sustainability, livelihoods, or legal compliance. So our job is to interpret this complex data landscape. We check whether vessels are operating in authorized zones, whether they are complying with licensing conditions, quota limits, and we flag any suspicious or unusual behavior. For example, we might detect unauthorized transshipments of vessels entering closed or protected areas, or dark vessels, those intentionally switching off their tracking system to avoid detection. So when we spot these anomalies, we coordinate closely with enforcement teams to assess the situation and take appropriate actions. It's a high-tempo operational environment where everything is moving: the data, the vessels, and sometimes even the regulations. And while technology is vital, the real strength of an FMC lies in human expertise, in people who know how to read patterns, who understand fishing behavior, and who can connect digital traits to a real-world risk. What I find especially meaningful about this role is how it bridges disciplines. It's not just a technical job. It's a space where science, law, and policy all meet. I'm not only tracking vessels on a screen, I'm also involved in regulatory reform, helping shape compliance strategies and working to align Morocco's national framework with its international and regional commitments. That includes interpreting conservation measures from regional fisheries bodies, updating our national procedures, and making sure we are meeting obligations under treaties like the FAO, Port State Measures Agreement. So to me, this work is about creating a kind of virtual presence at sea, because IUU fishing thrives in places where no one is watching. But when vessels know they are being monitored, not just occasionally, but constantly and coherently, the whole dynamic shifts. Visibility becomes a form of deterrence, if you want. And ultimately, while tools like VMS and satellite tracking are critical, they only work if we have strong institutions behind them, clear legal mandates, robust interagency cooperation, and a sense of trust and accountability across the entire fisheries sector. So that's the foundation we are working to build, and being part of that mission is incredibly rewarding.
Virtual presence at sea. I think that's really a beautiful, short summary
Yeah, I
of
like
what,
I
yeah.
like this sentence too.
Yeah, I think it really helps to easily explain what a fisheries monitoring center does, and it is so important. I really try and create a little bit more of an understanding around monitoring, control, and surveillance, and how states are working on that. So something you mentioned in this context, and which we also know now that you know quite a lot about because of your PhD, is the interaction with international fora. So you regularly attend these international meetings on behalf of the Moroccan Ministry of Fisheries, such as meetings of RFMOs, or regional fisheries management organizations, that Morocco is a member of. So we know that RFMOs are bodies that manage shared fish stocks across countries, and Morocco is involved with the GFCM, which is the RFMO responsible for fisheries in the Mediterranean, and ICCAT, which manages the tuna and tuna-like species in the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. So what's it like to represent a government at these meetings? I've never been, so I'd be very curious to know how you prepare for them. Is there something you can even do to prepare for them? Or is it really much more a matter of you're just going to have to see how it goes?
So it's both a responsibility and a privilege. Representing Morocco at Regional Fisheries Management Organization, or RFMO, meetings means stepping into a space where national interests meet collective responsibility. On the one hand, there to ensure Morocco's voice is heard, that our priorities, our data, and our realities are reflected in the decisions being made. On the other hand, part of a broader effort to manage shared fish stocks sustainably across borders. So these meetings are incredibly technical. We are often looking at detailed stock assessments, compliance reviews, observer reports, catch documentation schemes, and even the integration of satellite data for better monitoring. Preparation starts well before the meeting. It involves reviewing our national position, coordinating with legal and scientific teams, analyzing the latest conservation proposals, and understanding how regional dynamics, political, economic, and environmental might influence discussions. So, no matter how through the preparation, diplomacy is absolutely central. Negotiation becomes a constant. You might come in with a position, but once you are around the table, often with dozens of other countries, you have to read the room, pick your battles, and find common ground. Sometimes it's about making your technical case with clarity and evidence. Other times it's about building audiences, listening closely, and adapting your approach on the spot. So what keeps me grounded in these moments is the long view. These aren't just policy debates. They are decisions that affect ecosystems, coastal communities, and the integrity of regional cooperation. So I try to approach them not just as a national representative, but as someone invested in the sustainability and fairness of the entire system. It's not always easy, I know, but it's deeply meaningful, because if we want to ensure the ocean remains a source of life and livelihood for future generations, so those rooms, these meetings are where some of the most important decisions get made. So that's what I can tell you about this.
Sounds like an interesting mix between a technical meeting, looking at the science, but also a game of diplomacy, which I think is maybe true for any international meeting, and with all these different interests come together. So very interesting. It sounds like I would definitely enjoy this type of work.
You are welcome.
Maybe I should switch careers. Sounds very interesting how you describe it. Taking it back to Morocco for a second. So how significant are these types of meetings, and how significant are RFMOs for Morocco's fisheries and Morocco's fisheries management?
They are absolutely fundamental. Morocco's fisheries are deeply intertwined with those of our neighbors. So, not just in terms of geography, but also biology, economics, and politics. Fish don't recognize borders. Species like tuna, small pelagics across entire regions. And what happens is when countries' waters can directly impact the sustainability of stocks elsewhere. That's why regional fisheries management organizations like ICAT or GFCM are so essential. They provide a platform for science-based decision making and coordinated management of these shared resources. But their value goes far beyond just setting catch limits. They create frameworks that push all member countries, including Morocco, to continuously improve. For instance, when RFMOs adopt new monitoring or traceability standards, we have to ensure our systems are capable of delivering. That means investing in better surveillance, upgrading data sharing tools, strengthening our enforcement mechanisms, and sometimes even reforming our legal frameworks to align with international measures. So their impact is both external and internal. On one hand, they foster regional cooperation and collective action. On the other hand, they become a catalyst for national reform. And that's something I found really powerful. How participation in international governance can drive domestic progress. For me, being part of these conversations is also a way to ensure that countries like Morocco, with strong traditions in fisheries and a growing capacity in monitoring and compliance, can help shape the rules, not just follow them. It's about building trust, sharing responsibility, and ensuring that sustainability efforts are truly shared and equitable across the region.
There's another important international meeting that you attend, which is the COFI meeting, so the FAO's meeting on fisheries. And it's the main global forum where governments come together to discuss and shape really an international fisheries and aquaculture policy. So for those that are not so familiar with COFI, it meets every 2 years at the FAO in Rome, but they also have certain subcommittees, like there's one on aquaculture and fish trade that do meet in between the regular sessions. So you may see COFI pop up a little bit more than every 2 years. At COFI, what are some of the most pressing topics that are really high on the agenda now?
Okay, so coffee has become a really important space to tackle some of the most complex and pressing issues facing global fisheries today. And one of the biggest themes right now is equity and capacity development. There's a growing awareness that global fisheries governance must support small-scale fisheries, especially in developing countries. At coffee, we are seeing deeper conversations about how to ensure that certification schemes, trade rules, and traceability requirements don't unintentionally exclude or disadvantage small-scale actors. Climate change is another major topic. Coffee is increasingly focused on how fisheries and aquaculture can adapt to a changing ocean, shifting stocks, more frequent extreme weather events, and ecosystem disruption. So it's not just about science and stock assessments anymore. It's about resilience, food security, and protecting vulnerable coastal communities. And then there is another issue is digitalization, how to harness the massive amount of data now available through VMS and ES and other satellite tools. At Coffee, we are exploring how to harmonize these systems, promote data sharing between countries, and ensure that all these digital infrastructure supports transparency while also safeguarding data sovereignty and security. So, in a way, I can see that coffee is no longer just about fish. It's about people, justice, climate, and technology. And the agenda has expanded to reflect the complexity of the ocean governance landscape today.
Great. Yeah, it is indeed such an important forum, I think. So the topics high on the agenda now are the small-scale fisheries, digitization, climate change. And I think it's interesting with these meetings, like you do really see they've led to, real progress. So helped shape international instruments like the Code of Conduct and the Port States Measures Agreement to combat illegal fishing and a range of voluntary guidelines. And we really see, like in your thesis, for instance, how implementing these tools has then actually resulted into better fisheries management systems in the different countries. So I think these meetings are so interesting, and I want to take the conversation back to Morocco. So at Natural Justice, we're doing a lot of research. I briefly mentioned it before on the fisheries data sharing and then particularly the legal protection of fisheries data. So the ability to not just collect, but then also share the data with the right actors and have that then improve regional collaborations on fisheries management, for instance, to, provide more transparency in what's going on at sea. And this is not necessarily easy. There are a lot of practical concerns, such as maybe not having the data in a digital database or questioning the quality of the data. But there's also those legal concerns that we're looking at. So ranging from maybe commercial protections of data, because it's data related to a commercial activity, which fishing is, after all, to maybe concerns about personal data or privacy, because of course, a vessel is not just a vessel, it's there because people are on the vessel. And as head of the VMS unit, you are collecting a lot of the fisheries data through VMS. So what are some of the main concerns that you've seen in the context of your work when it comes to that data being protected and, maybe they don't want it to be shared beyond the Fisheries Monitoring Centre for particular reasons?
That's a really important question. But actually, I'm not in direct contact with fishers on a day-to-day basis, since my role at the Fisheries Monitoring Centre is more on the technical and regulatory side. But we work closely with specialized units within the ministry. They are the ones who regularly engage with fishers on the ground, especially during port inspections, outreach activities, and capacity building sessions. Back loop between our teams, and we take that feedback very seriously. One of the recurring concerns that often comes up is around data confidentiality. Many fishers recognize that systems like VMS or electronic logbooks are essential for managing resources fairly, but they also worry about how their data is used. They want to be sure that the location and activity data collected is strictly used for monitoring, compliance, and sustainability purposes, not for commercial exploitation or shared beyond its intended scope. And that's a valid concern. There's a very delicate balance between transparency and trust. On one hand, surveillance tools increase visibility at sea, and that's key to reducing IUU fishing and ensuring a level playing field. But on the other hand, trust in institutions is what makes these systems work in the first place. If fishers don't trust that their data is protected and used responsibly, it creates friction and sometimes even resistance to new technologies. So that's why we place a strong emphasis on data governance, clear legal frameworks that define how data is collected, stored, and shared, and by whom. It's also why transparency about the system itself, how it works, who has access to what is so important. So we are working to improve communication around these systems so fishers not only comply but also understand the why behind it. In the end, it's about building a culture of co-management where fishers aren't just subjects of surveillance but partners in sustainability. That trust is critical and it has to be earned, maintained, and renowned over time.
I think something really key you bring up there is that, of course, it's about balance, that even also looking at it legally, it will ultimately always be about balancing the interest of having certain data shared and the interest of the data subject to maintain a certain level of privacy or protection of this information. But also the trust in the institution, as you mentioned, to share that data is so key to this whole system working. You need to have them trust that their data is being handled responsibly for them to buy in and not try and, find a way around. So I think, that what you mentioned, that the trust in the institutions is really key for this whole system to work, is a really, really important point. A lot of organizations that are calling for more data sharing are not-for-profits, and the focus can be different. Some might focus on, establishing better regional collaboration because, we see the benefits of that in combating IUU fishing, for instance, but sometimes just more generally fisheries transparency. So what would your advice be to any not-for-profit that's working in the context of fisheries management or fisheries transparency? Is there anything that they could do, for instance, to support the work of a fisheries monitoring center, or, really make sure that how they're approaching this topic of fisheries transparency and fisheries data is done in a way where you have not-for-profits and governments working complementary to each other?
Thank you for this very important question. My advice would be engage early and engage respectfully. Too often, interventions come late in the process or from a position that assumes governments are simply failing to act, when in reality, fisheries governance is incredibly complex. It operates at the intersection of legal commitments, political pressures, socioeconomic realities, and deeply rooted cultural practices. So, governments, especially in developing countries, are constantly navigating difficult trade-offs. How to protect marine ecosystems without jeopardizing livelihoods, how to enforce sustainability while respecting national sovereignty, and how to build modern monitoring systems without losing the trust of the very communities they serve. So, before advocating for greater transparency, I would encourage NGOs to first take time to understand these complexities, to map the legal and institutional landscape, to listen to national concerns, and to engage with the specific sensitivities around operational data, especially when it involves question of national security or local livelihoods. In other words, don't just push for change, co-create it. Come with a spirit of partnership, not pressure. Some of the most meaningful collaboration I've seen happen when NGOs position themselves as enablers, offering technical expertise, helping governments build secure and interoperable digital platforms, supporting capacity building, or facilitating inclusive policy dialogues that brings fisheries scientists and regulators to the same table. So transparency is a critical goal, no doubt, but it's essential for accountability, trust, and better resource management. However, it must be pursued in a way that also respects legality, safeguards confidentiality, and understand that the need for institutional trust building. So pushing too hard, too fast without those safeguards can backfire. So especially in countries where governance systems are still evolving or where political trust is fragile. One of the most powerful roles NGOs can play is to amplify the voices of coastal communities, for example, especially small-scale fishers, women in fisheries, and youth, whose perspectives are often overlooked in top-down policy approaches. When civil society helps bring those voices into national and regional conversation, it not only improves equity, it also leads to smarter, more grounded, and more legitimate policy outcomes. So if I had to summarize this, it comes with humility, build long-term relationships, understand the local dynamics, and co-develop solutions that serve both people and ocean. So that's where real lasting change happens.
I think that's very wise. And you clearly have a lot of insights and experience. And thank you so much for sharing these, and not just about the fisheries monitoring in Morocco, but then also the role of international collaboration here. So looking at your career so far and, where you want to advance to, which quality do you think has really contributed to your success in this work? So maybe someone who's listening to this episode thinks, I also have that quality. Maybe I should pursue a career in fisheries management.
I would say resilience has truly been the key. Working at the crossroads of law, science, policy, and technology means you are constantly navigating complexity. Progress often happens incrementally, and you sometimes invest months, sometimes even years, into building systems or frameworks before you see tangible results. So that can be frustrating, especially when the stakes are so high. But I've learned that consistency matters just as much as momentum. What's kept me grounded is a deep sense of purpose. Even on the hardest days, I remind myself that this work contributes to something much larger: the sustainability of our oceans, the protection of coastal communities, and the long term health of global fisheries. So that belief gives me the energy to keep showing up, to stay curious, to keep learning, and to keep building, but even when the path is challenging. So, yes, I can see that also being a woman in a technical leadership role adds another layer. In many settings, you find yourself sometimes having to prove your expertise, not just once, but repeatedly. You encounter assumptions, sometimes subtle, sometimes not, about where you fit or what you are capable of. But instead of letting that discourage me, I've used it as motivation to lead with clarity and purpose, to be confident in what I bring to the table, and to open the door wider for others coming after me. So for me, resilience isn't just about pushing through difficulty, it's about remembering why the work matters and letting that why carry you forward. It's about having the patience to build trust, the courage to keep going when change is slow, and the humility to keep listening and adapting. That's what has shaped my journey, and that's what keeps me going, Eva.
And I think something where your resilience also shown is, focusing on aquaculture, for instance, but then still being open enough to be like, oh, actually, maybe I should pivot to fisheries. And I think, just constantly daring to question yourself, even if you've been building on something for a few years, to have the courage to pivot as well. And I think resilience certainly is a quality that's going to get you very far in this sector. So thanks for sharing that. So what would success look like for you ultimately?
For me, it isn't just about holding a position. It's about leaving a meaningful contribution. One of the things that I'm most proud of right now is the creation of a new think tank that I called Made Ocean Hub, focused on ocean governance, the fight against IU fishing, and the transformative power of data and emerging technologies in the Mediterranean region. We are in the final stage of launching it officially, and I couldn't be more excited. So the goal is to create a space where science, policy, and practice come together, not in silos, but in real, sustained dialogue. We want to empower decision makers with solid evidence, support regional cooperation, and amplify the voices of those who are often underrepresented in marine policy, especially small-scale fishers, women, and coastal communities. I envision Mid-Ocean Hub not just as an institution, but as a movement, one that brings governments, researchers, civil society, and practitioners to the same table, one that champions inclusive governance, transparency, and innovation in the face of complex challenges like IU fishing and climate-driven stocks shifts. We want to be a catalyst, helping countries navigate legal frameworks, adopt new technologies, and design more just and effective ocean policies. And Eva, I would be truly delighted to invite you to join us at the opening. Your voice, your work would be such an asset to this initiative. So
Thank you so much.
oh, you are more than welcome. So looking ahead, I also believe that true success means mentoring the next generation. I've been fortunate to benefit from incredible programs as the UN Nippon Fellowship, AFLOS, or others. And I see it as my responsibility to pay it forward. So to create more pathways for young professionals, especially young women, to enter this field, lead and innovate the more equitable, collaborative and transparent future for ocean governance, not just for Morocco, but for our region and beyond, then that, to me, is what success truly looks like.
Thank you. Thank you for providing us with a great opportunity to learn more about Moroccan fisheries management and also more global challenges like IUU fishing and international collaboration. I will certainly be following the Ocean Hub and how that will advance. It sounds very interesting. And I love to hear how you just never stop picking up new initiatives and projects and learning. And I think you're truly an inspiration for people working to advance responsible and equitable fisheries. So I'm really glad we had this opportunity and share your experience with a broader audience. So thank you.
Thank you to you, Eva.
Thank you for listening to the Natural Justice Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you're using. Not only does this support our channel, it also makes sure you never miss an episode. If you'd like a little more from us, you can sign up for our newsletters via the link in the description or by visiting naturaljustice.nl.